Do you like rhythm games where your skills are put to the test with some upbeat music? Or do you want to try and relive the days of thinking you can make it in a band? Well, join me as we search through some music and rhythm games and see whether they're worth it or not. Do you like DDR games but feel like some fighting could be added to it? Well, maybe Hailing from the Abyss is for you. This rhythm game mixes in a duel occurring within each stage, where you not only have to hit the beats on time, but survive too. The game has you battling in duels where each beat hit in time will attack your opponent, and miss they will attack you. You'll have health bars showing you how you're getting on, and although this is a battle mechanic, the game still plays out like any other DDR game. You have 4 directions that you can press, and the notes come down vertically to the beat of the song. The small additions for the fighting is that sometimes items may also be on the track that can help you out, like healing or more defense or offense items. Trying to pick up these items could feel a little awkward during battle, as they'd be in places where they may throw you off your rhythm, so you had to sometimes risk it. However, to be honest, it was kind of hard to know what these items were actually doing most of the time, as my attention was so focused on the DDR part section of the game, I couldn't really tell what was happening on the left dual side. So I wasn't really sure if these actually did anything for me in the end. While I don't think these songs will be for everyone in the game, I actually ended up quite enjoying them. The faster paced ones had a good bop for me, and the visuals were really cool when you had time to look at them. The challenge of a rhythm game is normally where a good bit of the fun comes from, I think. However, the difficulty of this game just felt weird to me. I started on easy to get a feel for it, and then on the first few stages I ended up just playing on hard as they felt too easy. But then by the boss stage, even on easy, was feeling too hard for me. A gimmick of the game is that you can buy items to help you in battle, to potentially heal you, or other items to get more coins to continue buying things. And while it's interesting to have these to help out, it weirdly felt like it defeated the purpose of improving your skills on the rhythm side, when you could just get help healing up with these. And on easy, it seemed like you couldn't die anyway, so it was really only useful on hard mode. After also doing a bit of reading for the game, I noticed that some mentioned that you could press all 4 buttons without actually having any consequences for it. So I went back to a song that caused me trouble the first time round, and yes, you could actually just mash all the buttons at once and it basically got past any section. As it's in early access, I am hoping this would be something they fix. As although you can intentionally try and not abuse this, it could be hard to know if you're not actually hitting the keys correctly if such a lenient system's in place. I completed the game on easy difficulty after about 5 hours, but those last few stages were not something I would call easy. Especially for some of the later stages and the very end song, I ended up using the exploit of hitting all the keys. And while it was fun just bobbing my head to the music, feeling like I was the next coming of Beethoven, it didn't feel satisfying as a game mechanic to have to do that even on easy mode. Oh, and one final hope for the full version of this game: please add a music volume slider, as I found no option to turn down the volume in the menu and ended up having to just turn down my headset as it was far too loud by default. It's certainly something every game should have, especially a music and rhythm one. I'm not really sure what to think of this game, as I'm honestly not too sure on what the audience for it should be. If you really like the challenge of DDR and rhythm games, the songs and the difficulty could be really great for that. However, with the 4-button press exploit that is easily done even accidentally, it makes it hard to know if you're actually the one being good at the game and learning the rhythm, or it's just letting you pass because of the accidental spam, which could honestly feel very unsatisfying for you. For the cheap price, it may be worth you grabbing to try, but I do hope by the full release it's managed to fix some of these exploits and some of the mechanics that didn't feel quite as satisfying. To go off the rhythm path for a minute, are you not very good with your hands, and maybe you're better with your mouth? Well then maybe this one's for you. One Hand Clapping is a game that's not about what your mind first goes to, it's instead a platform puzzle game where your voice is the key. I did find myself at the start was a little slow, and I wondered for the first 20-ish minutes if this was all that it was going to be, using your voice to go ah to make puzzles move around. Ah, 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 hi, ha, ma, ba, ba. And while I did find this bit quite slow, some of the puzzles for it were actually really cool. There was one that had you moving a clock face around so that you could platform up to it onto the next stage. And in between the fairly incoherent screaming, it did feel like a fairly nice and chill feeling game. I am glad, however, that more got introduced later on, as if the whole game was just like that first section, I think I would have probably gotten bored of it after about an hour or so. But once the second part was introduced, it brought voice pitch into the equation. You'd make a low sound to make things go down and a high sound to bring them back up. And I would just say, don't be afraid if you sound like a dying cat while doing it. I was finding this section rather challenging to begin with, as I wasn't very good at getting the high notes at first. That was until I found a rather unfortunate discovery that ended up working most of the time for me. It was just far too of an effective method for me to try, as it allowed me to control my pitch at the different levels very well. Just do be careful when you're playing that no one can see or hear you, else you'll end up looking like a raving madman. The next bit had you precisely controlling your pitch between high and low to create a path for your character to walk on. It made it feel and sound like a dying Flappy Bird clone, as you had to watch helplessly sometimes as your hard-worked pitch went nowhere you wanted it to go. Oh my god! This was honestly just a really interesting game for me to try out. It's certainly not going to be for everyone with its vocal gimmick, and the slower pace of the puzzles on the platform will turn some people off. But I really did end up enjoying this one, and if you're maybe looking for something a little different, I'd say it's worth giving a go. The menu also made very satisfying boop sounds and was very smooth brain entertaining for me. Do you want a game that kind of makes you feel like you're playing Bop It? As you spin, tap and flick to the beat in this homage to games like Guitar Hero and DDR. Here we have Spin Rhythm XD. To play you have a Guitar Hero-like track system where the notes come down vertically to you. However, unlike Guitar Hero, you have a spin down mechanic where you have to spin it to hit the correct colour. There are also quite a few different beat types that you could hit. One where you only had to have the spinner line up without pressing anything. Another where you had to click on time with the beat. And in harder difficulties, you'd also get some others, potentially where you'd have to go side to side or even have another button to press. Once I started getting through the first few songs, I had started on easy just to see how things went, but after each song there wasn't actually a clear way for me to go up in difficulty from the next screen. So I thought I was actually stuck on easy and had to just back out onto the songs list and then change the difficulty. I think if the game was going to have a playlist of just playing the next song on the list, it would have been quite nice to be able to quickly change your difficulty from that end page. One thing I did really like, however, was on the song selection screen. When selecting a difficulty, it had a preview of what it would be like. This could be really helpful in deciding if the speed or potentially the number of beats is too much for you before even loading into a song. I'd love to see other rhythm games have something like this, to be honest. The controls and the feedback for the beats generally felt really nice. The beats felt like they lined up really nicely with the music, and the mechanics felt tight where you had to hit the notes in the correct order, and pressing something incorrectly was penalised. I think for the mechanic of just spinning the wheel to be in the right spot doesn't have quite the same satisfaction as hitting a button at the right time. However, when using my trackable mouse, it did make it feel really fun as I was just spinning it left and right during some of the segments. I just got to let it roll over and let it spin. I think for non-rhythm players, the difficulty seemed fairly decent for them. The easy and medium difficulties felt like they could be a little too easy even for someone not that great at them due to being a little slower with not many beats. But going into hard did add even more beats and different segments to do, which could almost feel a little too overwhelming at times. The game overall had a decent amount of songs. You start with 16 and can unlock up to 64 quite easily while just playing the other available songs. I quite liked a decent selection of the songs, especially some of the ones that I had known from the other games like Just Shapes and Beats. But I certainly don't think a lot of these will be for everyone, and will obviously be a main factor of whether you may get into this game or not. There was also a song track creation system where you could actually make your own, even using your own music if you wanted. I would quite like seeing this, as even though the game doesn't have a huge amount of songs you may like, it could add a lot of replayability with either being able to find others that have made songs in the community or trying to come up with your own. I think if you're a fan of the Guitar Hero style rhythm games, this could be a really good buy. It's not overly expensive and can provide a good challenge for each level of player. Is having too many buttons to press during a rhythm game a bit too much for you? I understand. Our next game has you only pressing one button, however it is deceptively more challenging despite that. In Rhythm Doctor, we'll be saving patience to the beat. You'll start out quite simply by hitting on the 7th beat, and while this may sound easy, the game progressively makes it harder both visually and audibly for you to hit it all at the right time. You may have sections where the beat is muted and you'll have to count for yourself when the next beat's going to come in, or they'll make it visually distracting for you so you really have to focus on what your ears are hearing rather than what you're seeing. I think for someone not so great at rhythm games, it can still be a really fun game for you, but it certainly can be quite challenging once you start getting more into it. I did like the general progress the game gave to slowly introduce new things and making things more difficult while still keeping the simplicity of just having one button to press. The boss fights for the game were certainly challenging, but the implementations of them were a real highlight for me. With the simplicity of just having one button to hit at the correct time, the fights brought a lot of visual audio traps to the table to try and throw you off your rhythm. Whether this was by having the screen go glitchy or completely blank, or even another that I really liked but was really hard was making the game window itself start moving around your display. It really did throw you off what was happening, but still felt fair as there was a rhythm there to be able to get. I really liked this rhythm game as it just felt really polished even though it's still in early access. The music was fun, the controls, while nice and simple, were challenging with the overall setup of the stages, and it's certainly one that if you like rhythm games should be giving a go. I do also have a video where I do play the first couple of hours of it, so if it does look interesting to you, feel free to check it out. There we have 4 rather interesting music and rhythm games, and while I still may not be very good at them myself, I did enjoy being able to see just how different and accessible they could be. So if you yourself have some that you may want to try, or perhaps a collection of games you've never heard of and think may not be for you, why not just try booting them up for an hour and see what you think? You never know what treasures you may find.